Let's tank High Botanist Tel'arn in the nighthold on Mythic difficulty. Now, this fight is like the final phase in Heroic to start with, where you have three different versions of Botanist up at once. You have his Naturalist, his Solar, and his Arcanist. Now, depending on the order you kill each one, the others become empowered with different abilities. Now for this guide, we're going to kill them in the order of the Naturalist, then the Arcanist, and then finally the Solarist. This strat is also known as the Sacrifice strat. So let's begin by looking at phase 1. So in phase 1 on Mythic, we're going to single down and kill Naturalist to start with, and this will get rid of the healing circles that Naturalist drops. Now, you need to know for this phase that you really need to keep an eye on the timer for the healing circles, and as a gauge point, they come out roughly after the first set of orbs, and then another one will come out after another set of orbs a little bit later on. But just get into the rhythm of moving this boss out, dropping the healing circles away from the main circle, and then repositioning the three bosses back on the main orb spawn point that you're going to be killing first. Now, like on Heroic, you've still got to worry about all three abilities from all three adds. None have been empowered yet. So the Arcanist is going to do the taunt swap with the recursive strikes. He's also going to spawn Control Chaos. And he's also going to put Call of the Night on the range and healers. Solarist is going to cast Flare on the target, which you don't really need to worry about too much. Solar Collapse, which you need to make sure you're moving out of quickly, so the melee can get as much uptime on the boss and not have to worry about this ability too much. And then Summon Plasma Spheres, which are pretty much the same throughout the whole fight, and they spawn in the same locations as they do on Heroic. You just need to decide in what kill order you're going to be doing this, and make sure that you're not double procking them, as this will pretty much cause a wipe. And Naturalist in this phase casts Toxic Spores, the Healing Circle, and Parasitic Fetter, which you just dispel off the player and the ads spawn from. Apart from that, this phase is pretty easy. All you need to make sure about the whole raid in general is players are trying as hard as possible not to hit toxic spores, and you have an immunity soak rotation to soak up any excess spores that are around. To help us out, for Control Chaos, we had a set position we'd go to depending on where it'd spawn. So if it'd spawn on the right group, we'd move the boss left. Left group, we'd move the boss right. And if it was on the tanks and melee, we'd move the boss in between both range groups, as to not have to make these range groups move too much. A final thing to note about Control Chaos throughout this fight is it's a good time to consider using a defensive cooldown, because your healers will be moving and you're going to be moving. So just pop a defensive and it should help you take a little bit less damage when this ability is actually going out. For recursive strikes, you want to be taunt swapping between 5 and 6 stacks, and all I did to make it easier for myself to taunt, since I was putting all my main damage into Naturalist, is to set a focus on the Arcanist, keep an eye on my debuff, and then taunt through the focus frame. This will just help you out a little bit. Obviously, you don't need to do it if you've got other methods, but it's just what I did. And that's pretty much it for phase 1. It's not too difficult. It's pretty much a bit of a dance. You just got to get used to the movement a little bit. But once you come through with that, phase 2 is pretty much very similar. And the only real difference is when the spheres now die, they will now spawn lashes. So you're going to have 3 sets of lashes every set of spheres that come out. And for us as tanks, all we really needed to do was position the boss. Instead of being on top of the orb, we was positioned slightly off center to the orb. And this is so that the melee could still cleave onto the orb. But as soon as the lashes come out, they had enough time to react to the fixate. So if they were fixated, they could just take a few steps away. And if they wasn't, they could just kill the lashes and stun lock them up. Now, apart from that, there's nothing really else much to say about this phase. It's a lot easier than phase 1, in my personal opinion. And the only bit you might start panicking is when you're starting to get close to phase 3. And all you need to do is make sure your raid stays calm, get the boss into a good position. The position we chose for phase 3 was pretty much next to the skull orb, and make sure no one stood on top of the main tank at this point. So kill off Arcanist and get ready for the final phase. Now, you don't want anyone on the main tank, because the main tank's now going to get rooted by the ability Parasitic Fetter. Now, what this ability does is it'll root the main tank, or any player within 4 yards of the main tank, inflicting 300,000 nature damage every second until dispelled. This effect increases in damage by 10% each time it ticks, and when Parasitic Fetter is removed, a Control Chaos occurs and Parasitic Lashes are formed. So the goal at this point is to hold the boss as long as possible before we die, and you do this by using external cooldowns, mitigation, and defensive abilities. You want to aim for about 50% to 45% on the first transition. You call for the tank to taunt, and the tank should take it to one of the other orbs, just a little bit off center, and then it rinses and repeats. You then get a dispel, you summon Lashes and a control chaos. Lashes get killed down, and then the boss gets burned into again. Now, things to note is you want to be off center now from the orb. They no longer spawn Lashes, but they do summon spores, and taking the parasitic fetter and a spore will mean you're taking a lot more damage than you need to, and healing will just get behind. So make sure that the orb you're next to, that you have a rogue, just run and soak all the spores up so none are going to spawn on you as a tank. And apart from that, make sure the orbs are getting killed. Now, the other two set of orbs will have spawns on them as well, and people who will be soaking these will be the ones who will be sacrificing themselves, and they'll be doing this to get rid of Solaris' other ability that he gets in this phase, which is Collapse of Night. And this is pretty much the same as the ability Call of Night, but you also get solar collapses on top of the player who it's affected by. So you just want to sacrifice these players off and battle res them, and they do that by having someone stay with them, and this player's got Collapse of Night just eats a load of spores that have spawned under the orbs that have been killed and then dies. And this pretty much negates the whole mechanic. Obviously you use a lot of damage over time, but we found this was the easiest way to kill this boss for us. As a DPS gauge, you want to be killing the boss while the boss is still on the second tank, and pop all your remaining DRs into this last tank just to keep them alive, making sure anyone with Collapse of the Night runs out and dies. Apart from that, this fight is pretty simple. Just make sure you're not eating excess spores in phase 1 and 2, and you should get a kill pretty easily. Anyway guys, I hope this guide helps you. Please like, comment and subscribe for more videos.